about yourself in the chat. Share a little bit about yourself in the chat. We love seeing people chat in the chat. Really fun. So we're only here for an hour today, but I hope we can make a lot of use from that time. We have a pretty packed agenda. We're going to go pretty quickly. Yes, I do. Leisha, the meeting will be shared tomorrow at 1 p.m. The recording is going to go out through email. So if you're signed up for our email still, then you'll get that recording. But generally speaking, we're really happy to have everybody here. If you have questions, we're going to save some questions for the end. Specifically, we'd like to have the questions kind of remain on topic, which is going to be about the interface today. But before we dabble into this a little bit, I just want to let you guys know why we're doing this. A big part of it is that, you know, I have been watching my team use Clo for the past 2.5 years. Monika is the one that I started off watching, and you know, we've been working in Clo together, but I didn't learn it until this past summer. And over summer, I got the opportunity to take Trudy's amazing course. And when I had questions in that course, I had 3 people on my team, Monika, Trudy, and Jasmine, who already knew a lot about Clo. And so anytime I had questions, I went to them and I made a Loom video and I was like, hey, this is happening. Why is it happening? Can you help me figure it out? Can you help me troubleshoot? I just needed help. And I realized through that experience that it was way easier for me to learn quickly, having this big springboard of 3 amazing designers using Clo already. So I wanted to be generous and give you guys a springboard so that you can come to these meetings for the next 4 weeks and come with questions. If you have questions, you know, think about it during the week while you're working. Think about the questions you have and come for the end so that you can ask the questions to our team. We can talk about it and we can help you through any of your big challenges, because it is really hard to learn this program without help. So without further ado, we're going to jump into the agenda, which is going to be on the next slide. So we're going to start off and we're going to just go around, and what the 5 of us on the call are going to be introducing ourselves a little bit, giving you our background. Then we're going to talk a little bit about our computer setups, because we all kind of have our own unique setup for how we're using Clo. Then we're going to dive into the interface. Trudy is going to share her screen and we're going to show you what it looks like in case you've never seen it. We're going to walk through the big important areas that we think are most important and most critical to your knowledge early on. Then we're going to walk through our top 10 tools. We're going to wrap up the conversation there with our hotkeys and shortcuts, you know, so you can go fast, because it's one thing to learn Clo, but it's another thing to be able to like maneuver between the different tools quickly. And I think learning the hotkeys and shortcuts is really critical for that. And then we're going to have end of the conversation is going to be a Q&A section. So please feel free to add your Q&As into the chat. Riley's going to organize them and keep us, you know, able to answer those throughout once we get to the end. But try to keep them on topic for the interface if you can, and hopefully we will be able to answer them all. So I'm just going to start with our Meet the Experts. So I'm Kristen. I have been a lingerie and swimwear designer for about 14 years. I've worked with some of the biggest names in the industry. I have always been somebody who loves technology, so I was really keen to use Clo through like an intermediary from, you know, the moment I heard about it, basically. And I was really, really excited when Monika came and told me that she was a technical designer who didn't have experience in Clo, but she was eager to learn, because she is an amazing designer, technical designer, and I was so excited with and impressed by her ability to learn, because she basically taught herself in about 3 months of like hardcore head down learning. And I mean, she's grown a lot since then too. But I'm going to pass it over to Monika so she can share a little bit about her experience. Oh wait, actually one more thing about me. I've only started working in Clo myself for about 4 months. I started learning in about June when Trudy shared her course with me to give her feedback. So I've only been using it myself for 4 months, but watching other people use it for about 2.5 years. Monika, now I pass to you.
Cool. Thank you, Kristen. I'm really excited to start this journey and start this workshop with you. I'm Monika. I live in Brooklyn, New York. I have about 10 years experience as a designer and technical designer, specifically in intimates and swim. I've worked for brands such as Aerie, Solid and Stripe, Six Shore Road, Li & Fung, which is everything from Kmart to Walmart to Anthropologie and lots of small brands. And now I work with Kristen at the studio. I'm also a fit model, so I'm size small 34B, which is very handy.
If anyone's looking.
Yeah, as Kristen said, I taught myself Clo3d, and I taught myself not just specifically within the intimates world, but also with outerwear and menswear. It was kind of nice to work during the day in intimates, but then be able to do something a little bit different at night when I was just learning or watching videos as well, because it seems like that's mostly what you can find on YouTube. Yeah, I think that's about it. Cool. Hand it over to you, Trudy.
All right, thanks. Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Trudy. First, I want to just say thank you to Kristen for making this happen and bringing us all together, because I always love just sharing knowledge on Clo in any form that I can make it happen. So this is awesome. I am a freelance designer, and I specialize in intimate apparel, specifically using Clo3d. Before I got into design, I was a stay-at-home mom for a couple years, and before that, I was a pilot in the Canadian Air Force doing various roles. I did search and rescue on the West Coast, and I did also Arctic operations in Canada. So sometime in around 2016, I started teaching myself how to sew, and I got into it was just a hobby for me at the time. And when I left the military and I thought I would be a stay-at-home mom, that hobby just kept growing and growing. And I found my love for pattern drafting and technical design, and specifically intimate apparel, because finding a good underwire bra that can fit me is like nearly impossible. So it was nice to be able to do it for myself. And once I learned Clo3d, like, you can do pattern drafting, and then you can also like see that pattern in the 3D form without having to like cut it out and trace the paper and sew it together and then find your sample. I was pretty blown away. And it's been really interesting seeing this transition in the industry between like the old school way of doing things and the new process of incorporating digital processes. So yeah, I'm just here to learn along with all you guys and share what I know, and I look forward to the sessions. I'll pass it along to Colleen.
Thanks, Trudy. Hard to follow that because Trudy has amazing experience and amazing life story. I love it. But my name is Colleen Leung. I am a technical design director. I am currently on a little break from the industry, enjoying some time with my child. But yes, I have about 17 years experience. I went to school at FIT and I focused on intimate apparel design. My focus in the industry has been swimwear, intimate apparel, sleepwear, activewear. I come to you guys, I am the yay FIT alum, I see that comments. So I come as I am the most novice beginner person for Clo. I have the most industry experience of the group, but I have the least experience in Clo. I took an introductory course in Clo offered by them. It was a great 3-day immersive experience. As I am on a break, I haven't used it much since then. So I'm kind of looking at Clo from a perspective of how can we apply this for our teams? How can we get benefits for people? How does this help our production timelines, our sampling, all of that? So, you know, everyone has different ways that they're approaching this and how they're using it. So that's kind of what I bring to the table. And yeah, I've been, most recently, I was at Adore Me for about 8 years. I also was at Macy's and Sears and Dear Kate. I helped launch them back in the day. But yeah, it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm so excited so many people are here. So I'm gonna pass it on to Jasmine.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Jasmine. I've been in the industry about 3 years, but I first learned Clo in college at Drexel University. I was in the first class that they offered, so there weren't a lot of resources out there. So after that course I took, I kind of took a 2-year break because I wasn't using it. I was also not using it when I got into the industry very much, but I got back into it by watching the Clo YouTube tutorials, and I've been actively using it ever since. But I highly recommend Trudy's course if you're getting into Clo, because that's also very good. Yeah, that's me.
Awesome. All right. Thank you guys for giving your warm introductions. I'm going to stop sharing right now, and we're going to have Miss Trudy share. Actually, well, we can share a little bit about our setups first, and then we can share screens. But so just going back through the way we went through cycle, I am probably one of the more unique people. I use a pen. So with my computer setup, I am using a walk-on pen when I'm in Clo. It's kind of weird. I had to figure out the right buttons to make all of my things work. It was kind of the biggest pain in my butt for the whole thing. Once you get into the interface, that is a really big challenge, figuring out how to make everything work. I also have 2 monitors, so I have the ability to kind of bring something over onto my other monitor and keep it there, and then have like a video on my other monitor at the same time, which is super helpful for using Clo. And I'll pass it on to Monika to share a little bit about her setup.
Cool. Yeah. So I'm on a MacBook Pro with an M1 chip, and I have an external trackpad. So I don't use a mouse. I use a trackpad and I use 3-finger gestures. I think what's interesting is that up until recently, it was quite tricky to use Clo on a Mac. But I think about a year and a half ago, they did make some improvements that makes it super easy, intuitive, and to work with a Mac. And also the rendering capabilities are pretty great now compared to where they used to be. So, Trudy?
Trudy, what about you?
Cool. Okay, I'm gonna just drop my stats into the chat here. I have a lovely husband who's a gamer, and he was very happy to help me upgrade my computer system so that he could take like the parts and use them in his computer. That was early this year, and last year I was working on a MacBook from 2019. It had an M1 chip. And I was using Clo in that transition between like before they optimized for Mac and after they optimized for Mac. And yeah, it definitely got a lot nicer. It was somewhere around the version 6 update. And I wanted to mention this. I have this 3-button mouse, and I'm able to program it. So like left and right, I've programmed shortcuts onto my mouse, as well as like these little buttons here. I've programmed copy and paste onto it. Just makes it, anything that makes you a little bit more efficient in your flow, helps you with the learning. It helps you with you being able to use the program in the way that you want to use it. So you're not stopping and trying to figure out like where you need to go to apply a certain tool or stuff like that.
Colleen, what about your setup?
Okay, so I continue to be the novice in this. So I have a lovely lightweight laptop that cannot handle Clo. Clo has a great reference. If you go on their website, it will actually give you the stats of what you need, like the minimum requirements. So when I was going to take that course from Clo back in early August, we realized my computer can't handle it. So I actually had to borrow my husband's work laptop to bring that in. Obviously, that's not a sustainable setup. So another gamer husband, I now have my husband's old gaming desktop computer that we're getting set up, and for me, and then he's getting a newer, higher powered. But Basically, if it has the gaming, if you can game on your computer, you could probably run Clo. So that's where I am at. And then I use a 3-button mouse as well. So you can use the scroll button in the middle. And I need to talk to Trudy about how to set up the shortcuts, because there are side buttons I accidentally keep hitting. So that is my setup. I'm talking to you guys from my laptop, and then I have the desktop up in front of me.
What about you, Jazz?
Me, I just use my laptop. So it's a MacBook Pro with the M1 chip. And then I use the trackpad that's on the laptop. I don't have an external one.
So you can see anything is possible. We all have very different setups. We can make it work. There's a lot of different, functionalities in Clo that allow you to change what buttons do. So don't be afraid. You can get there no matter what. And now we will turn it over to Trudy to share her screen so we can walk through the interface a little bit.
Before I share my screen, I just wanted to show you guys this. Before I upgraded my computer and stuff, I have this other screen, and that's what I use as my second screen right now. And that was I could connect that. That was the first thing I upgraded, because it is so nice to have the extra real estate to work in Clo and move one of your windows over to another screen, or just have your tutorial set up on the side over there. And I dropped that link, or I think we're gonna, the link is somewhere, and we'll make sure that you guys get it. But I would say if you're gonna start splurging on something, go for a second screen. And that's a portable one too, so I really like it.
Yeah, I just want to say that we're going to share the deck at the end of, not at the end of this call, but in the email recap. So there will be all the resource links at the very end of that deck. So you'll get those.
Okay, I'm going to start sharing.
Go for it.
All right, can you all see this?
Yep.
Okay, I'm just going to reset. Okay, so when you open Clo for the first time, it's going to look something like this. Up at the top, you got your usual suspects. These guys here, where you can access a lot of the menus for all of the other screens. Here you have a library. You can open and close it. You have your library tab, your history tab, the modular library, which is a fairly new feature, and we haven't been using it very much, but we are interested in getting into it. And then the modular library, again, we don't use that one very much, but we like the library. And in the library, Clo comes stocked with a whole bunch of assets. There's some garments that come stocked in Clo, not this cute that's something that we made. It comes with avatars. It comes with some other hangers. It comes with a whole bunch of fabrics, which we can look at a little bit later. Different hardwares and trims, and materials are something that I think I added. And then at Kristen Anderson, we have started making our own 3D assets library. So we have our own avatars. We started creating templates for files that we typically work in, hardwares and trims, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the library. Under the history tab, it will show you everything you've done in your file since you last opened the file. So every time you open the file again, it's only going to show you, this will all be blank. And then every time you make a change to your file, it's going to save the different things that you did. So you can go back to a previous version. If you're oh, I messed everything up, I need to go back 300 steps. You can go somewhere previous in your file. And if you're somewhere where you really like where you are, you're okay, I like the way this garment looks, but I'm going to try and change let's say we want to lower the waistline really quickly. Oops, actually, I didn't want to do that. So if you're going to make a change, but you want to save this version of it, you can save that as a 3D state.
It's kind of like a snapshot on AI or Photoshop.
And so you can rename this. And then you can change it. Oops, something like that. And if you're okay, no, I don't like this change, you can go back to version 1 and it will reload the file. to where it was before. So that's kind of useful to have, especially like if you're going through a lot of variations in a particular file. So that's that tab over here. Right here, you have your 3D window. In the 3D window, you have a whole bunch of little options over here. So you can show or hide your garment. You can show or hide your sewing lines. You can show or hide pins, et cetera, et cetera. There's a bunch of options in there. Then you have your trims and buttons. You can toggle them on or off right here. Avatar, fabrics. You can look at there's different ways that you can look at your fabric. And fit maps, we don't really use fit maps that much. That might be something interesting for us to talk about in another conversation. And then different ways of looking at your avatar. And then next over here, you have your 2D pattern window. And in your 2D pattern window, you have some more options, display options here that you can look at. I often, like, you can turn on or off grading. There's no grading on this pattern, so it's not very useful. You can show seam allowances here, baselines. And as you notice, I'm hovering over each icon and it tells me there's a little pop-up that shows exactly what the things are. So if you're not sure, you just hover over and you can see Clo tells you what they are. Same thing with your 2D pattern information. There's no, I didn't change any of the names on this, but if you named all your pattern pieces, you could toggle that on and off here. You could make annotations, toggle it on, off there. This is to show the line lengths of all your pattern pieces. You can toggle it on and off. And you can see that the shortcut for that is Shift Z. So if you, is that like another little trick, is that if you are trying to memorize your shortcuts and you know that you're toggling on and off your line lengths all the time, Shift Z, you just hover over, okay, Shift Z, I got to remember that one. And you're good to go. And then here's your fabric view. So you can look at it with your pattern. You can look at it in mesh view. You can look at it in plain view and transparent and opaque. And then this is nice too. Sometimes like you could just have like random colors just so you can differentiate your pieces. That is
I like that one a lot. I think it's nice when you don't know which side you're looking at.
Okay, and then after the 2D pattern window, we have the object browser and the property editor down here. These are also collapsible. So in your object browser, this basically has everything that's in your 3D and your 2D windows. So if you go to the scene tab right here, it's going to show you, if you drop this down, these are all your pattern pieces in your 2D window. These are all your sewing relationships that you've created. This is everything that you have in your 3D window, so your avatar, and if you have any materials in there, if you have any scene or props in there, and environment stuff like lighting and stuff, that's where you find that. This is our fabric, and so any fabric that's applied or that you're getting ready to apply later on will be in this tab right here. You have graphics, buttons, buttonholes, et cetera, gradings down here, and points of measure there. Mainly, like when you're first starting out, this is the one that you're going to want to pay attention to, is your fabric. And then down here in your property editor, these are all the properties of whatever you have selected. So if I have this fabric selected, I'm going to find all the options to change the properties of that fabric down here. So for example, I can say I can change it to what type of fabric I want, something that's shiny, silk, satin, whatever, like the finish of that fabric, that's where you change that. You can add textures here if you have like prints or patterns that you want to add to that. That's where you add your lace textures if you have a lace texture that you want to add. And then maps, normal map, displacement map. Those are a little bit more advanced, but we can get into that later. More properties. And the other really important thing to know in your fabric is that you have your physical property editor down here. So whatever visual properties you want applied to your fabric get applied up here under the material tab, and then your physical properties get applied down here in the physical properties tab. So these are all the ones that come stocked in Clo. Often for intimate apparel, I stick with the knits.
Yeah, there's not a lot of great fabrics for our expertise at all.
Yeah. Yeah, just for a quick reference, I'll use like cotton jersey, knit ponte jersey. I use that one a lot just to throw it in there and see what's happening with my pattern. It's something with a little bit of stretch. And then you can also get fabrics from Clo3d or VMod from various other places. I think that's all I'll get into for the interface. Do you guys have any comments or questions? Probably something I didn't talk about was the context menu. So if you right click, you get a context menu. So all the options that you might have. So just somewhere in the gray space in my 2D window, I right click and then you get certain options for things here. You might use your lock internal lines or unlock them as you're modifying patterns. Same thing with baselines. Your grid properties are right here. So if you don't want to see your grid, that gray grid in the background, you can toggle that on and off right there.
There's a couple of questions about making your own custom fabrics, and I think you can make your own custom fabrics. Part of the challenge is that there's a number of properties that you have to manipulate to make them react differently. Trudy, could you pop that into the property editor and just show them a little bit of that area?
Oh, like creating your own custom fabrics?
Well, like, I mean, the Swiss dot is something I think we purchased, but if you go into the main fabric, I think it might be more helpful there. Like there's, I think it's lower than that. Kind of at the bottom where the property for the fabrics is. The physical.
Oh, do you mean under creating the physical properties for your fabrics?
Yeah, I think it's under detail, right?
Properties. Yeah, I don't have much to say about that. So yeah, if you open up this detail, under the details here, there's all these. If you ask Clo3d, they'll tell you that they have like this little contraption or like a whole setup on how you measure your fabric so that you can input those numbers properly. And that's only available to enterprise clients. So I'm trying to hack my way around that and figure out like exactly how it works. But I definitely don't have much like in-depth knowledge on that. If we don't have a fabric that I've gotten from VMod or Clo3d, I will just pick one of these default fabrics and use that. Or I might take, like, let's say we want the physical properties of this Swiss dot mesh. We know it's 95 nylon, 5% elastane, and it's 56 GSM. So we're like, okay, we like that one. I'll grab it, and then I'll just delete all the textures. Like I'll delete the texture, I'll delete the normal map. You just press this little garbage button here. Just delete all this stuff. And then you can add your own textures, but you still get the physical properties of that fabric.
Yeah, I would say that's a really good hack for like, if you know you've got something sort of similar, but it doesn't look the same, it can work to like finesse that a little bit. I think Monika might be able to speak a little bit more about that. I know she's made some of her own custom fabrics before.
Yeah, I've made some custom fabrics, mostly just doing a bit of research on what other people are using and making adjustments from there. But I think Clo3d has such a good library of different fabrics and materials. There's also a lot of the bigger brands that we source from, we being like industry standard companies that we source from, have created their fabrics in 3D, and you can access those from the Clo3d website. Some of them are free, some you have to pay for, but they're at least a good starting point if you need meshes or certain swim materials. Yeah.
I've also heard that, and I don't know, maybe this is one that's in Clo3d, but Tea and High Lace, I've heard, does a lot of digitizing on their laces. So that might be one to check out.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. All right, ready to roll into the top 10 cool tools?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, we're going to go over some of our favorite tools. I am kicking it off with a couple of mine. So my favorite tool in the beginning as a beginner You know, I come from technical design. I really appreciate the pattern side, the 2D side of this screen. So I really like when I'm trying to figure out how to put this 2D pattern on the 3D avatar, I like the arrangement points. So if you have the arrangement points, it just helps you align things, put them on the body approximately where they should be. I know in my course, there was something where I had forgotten to use the arrangement points and it didn't sew up correctly. So I just find them a really good baseline, then you know everything is where it should be. If you guys want to show the arrangement points, it's these blue dots that appear all over the 3D avatar. And then if you're placing something, like if we were doing a skirt, like we would place the waistband, you know, at her belly button, and we'd be able to turn the avatar around and see that it's placed correctly. We would be able to place a skirt, you know, appropriately. Yeah. So the panty we could place at her front, and we place at the back, and you can hover and drag the piece as well. But I find it really useful when we're trying to sew things together. I especially find it helpful actually if you're doing a sleeve, which I know we don't do in intimates as much, but you can kind of turn the avatar and kind of look at it from above and place the sleeve, and that helps a lot as well. So these are the arrangement points. And then the next tool I like, which I'll just speak high level on, and I know the team's going to talk more about it in detail, but I really like the sewing tool. So the sewing tool there's different types of sewing tools. There's a segment sewing tool and a free sewing tool, and I believe there might be one other, but in general, I like the sewing tool because it actually will show you like how your pieces are coming together. So if you see those lines, if you're trying to sew something together, you know, if they pull it out, yeah. Kristen, are you navigating or is Trudy navigating?
I am.
It's Trudy.
Okay, perfect. I just want to address whoever. So as you can see Trudy pulling out on the screen, you know, you can see like the sewing lines, which is really helpful. Obviously in a panty, it's pretty basic, but you know, if you're doing a bra and you have a bunch of pieces coming together and something's not sewn right, like if you look at the side seam here, you can see those brown lines are twisted. So then you know the sewing got twisted when you're doing the step, so you can reverse the sewing and correct it. So I really like the sewing tool. I think it's very interesting. It allows you to see how it all comes together. And then
I think
yeah.
Sorry, just to add on that, I also think that one of the great things about the sewing tool is that you can really mess things up if you're like only looking at the 2D window and not looking also at the 3D window to double check the sewing lines, because sometimes sewing lines look like they're wrong in the 2D window, but they're actually correct in the 3D window. So it's really good that you have both of these aspects to double check and look at. The sewing tools are also available on the left side on the 3D window. It's selected, it's blue on the left side right now. So you can use them in that window. It's easier to use them on the pattern side though. Sorry, you can continue.
No, thanks, Kristen. Yeah, no, it's great. And so with the sewing tool, one of the things that is really great about it, like Kristen said, you know, what you're more comfortable on. Are you more comfortable on the 2D? Are you more comfortable on the 3D? We know different people. I feel like, not to generalize, but I feel like technical designers are probably more comfortable on the 2D side with the patterns, and designers probably more comfortable on the 3D side. And I love that that option is there, you know, that's how Clo works, is that you're looking at the patterns on one side, you're looking at garment on the other. You know, with my experience, I have a lot of expertise in pattern making. So for me, I'm going to look at this 2D window, and if there's something that looks funky, I'm gonna be like, well, the pattern's not right there. Let's fix the pattern, and then we can sew it together. And then the next tool that I really love is the simulating tool. So that's after you use your arrangement points, you sew the garment together, you sew the pieces, and then you simulate to see what happens. And when you simulate, like if that side seam was twisted, you'd see something really funky. Maybe Trudy, do you want to twist the side seam? And you can kind of, yeah, so then you see like, thank you. So you see something funky happened. Maybe I'll give you designers inspiration to change something. But I really like the simulation. I know in the course I was working, we had a dress we were making and had a zipper in the back and it had a waistband in it. And I had missed one little notch, like one little tiny segment in sewing. And there was this little bubble, this little ripple, and then the zipper wasn't sitting right. So the simulation tool helps you a lot to be able to see it. Generally, the recommendation is to not leave simulation on all the time because it will slow down your computer. So best bet is to turn it on and off as you need it. I believe the quick key for that is a space bar.
Yep.
Yeah, so I really enjoy the simulation tool and that that partnership between the 2D and the 3D. And I'm going to pass it over to Kristen.
All right, since I'm the next newbiest person on Clo, I have some pretty basic ones. I did also want to point out something that is pretty specific to like body contour designs that we didn't cover earlier, but if you select your avatar and then you go into the property window, you can change it because normally the default is that her skin offset is 3. And a skin offset of 3 actually puts it like sort of floating around her instead of like up against her skin. And right now I think Trudy just changed it. So now you can see this is what it actually would look like if you didn't change the skin offset to be 0. Skin offset is actually an amazing tool because it really helps us realize how close to the body things can be. And so one thing that should definitely not go unnoticed in this conversation. But the other things I love the internal line tool. I think that is a really fun way to play around with your pieces. In our specific category, we often have a lot of really small pieces that, you know, kind of have to come together. And using the internal line tool, you can, you know, decide what your lines are going to be, where you want to have a galloon lace edge or where you want to have, you know, a mesh insert. And you can cut and sew the pieces apart so that you are like actually doing it without having to trace over the top of the other piece and then reset the lines yourself. So literally what Trudy just did there is she created a whole nother piece and now she could change that to a different fabric if she wants, and it would look different, which is really helpful because, you know, we need to be able to like separate pieces, but we also don't want to have to redo the work we've already done by tracing. So I love that you can do that. I also love the internal line tool because we do a lot of double checks on our specs and measurements when we're making tech packs. You know, we don't want to have a lot of oopsies. And so I often use the internal line tool to just do some like really basic spec checks and make sure that we're on point there. It can just be a really great helper for tech packs and making sure everything is in the right spot. The other tool I really love, which is, you'd see it more if we were using like a galloon lace, of course, but this is a pattern mesh. So you can actually see it when we rotate this, but there's the grain line tool. And the grain line tool allows you to modify where the grain of the fabric sits. And often we have, you know, a straight edge that needs to go along a straight edge of a pattern. So being able to manipulate that and put the galloon lace in the right place is awesome. It's also a way to make a directional print if you had some kind of print in there. It can also change the way your fabric reacts if you have like a custom fabric of sorts. Yep, thank you, Trudy, for popping that in there. Yeah, so you can see how important it would be for, you know, if you're not using it all over lace, this is definitely super helpful. And then my last favorite tool that I wanted to share is I love sewing with the M to N sewing tool. It's how I learned. It's actually what Trudy recommended in her intimates course. And you know, there's different tools for sewing, and one is really easy. It's just this piece to this piece, which is like the basic sewing tool. And I like that, but because we have so many little pieces and because we have different lines that are going together, it often doesn't work all the way the best way. So I love using the M to N sewing tool. It is, you know, the easiest way for my brain to connect the dots of my pattern piece here going to there, and making sure that they work together in a nice way. Trudy's just showing us a little bit of the internal line and how it would affect things to have a different pieces coming together, because you'll notice that what she did here, you know, the top piece is larger on the back, and on the front, the bottom piece is larger. So it would be kind of weird if you sewed it with the basic tool, it wouldn't work quite right. And this allows you to piece multiple pieces to multiple pieces, which is often what we're doing in this category.
Oops, there's an error.
I think it went all the way around the back triangle. I think that's what happened. So for this tool, you start and you click, and then you drag the cursor to the point where you want it to stop. Then you have to hit enter to sew the other side to it. So you start to click, and then enter. And then once you hit enter, it allows you to sew to the other side of the garment.
And there's a little, like if you ever forget, there's a little instructions that come attached to your cursor. So you create your first sewing relationship first, and then hit enter, and then click, 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 click as much times as you need to create your second relationship, and then hit enter. And then now you have all of that sewn together the way you want it to be.
Yep. And then I think, Monika, it's your turn to share some of your tools that you like.
Cool. So I really like to use the strengthening tool. This is Command K or Control K if you're on a PC. This is super handy to see exactly what's happening with your internal lines if you're applying any folding to your internal lines. This is also a great way to check fit and see how things are aligning or sitting on the body.
It makes her look like plastic.
Yeah. And it's not the best for checking, like you would not want to apply this and look at a fit map, for instance, but this is just a great way to see exactly how garments are sitting along the body. It basically applies like a stronger material, like a default strong material to the fabric. And yeah, this is also really good if you're,
I was gonna say it smooths things out. Like if you have like a weird wrinkle and you're like, what's going on there? And you just want to like smooth it out like you would in real life, then that's a nice way to do it.
Also, if you're applying pleats and you want to see, let's say if you apply an internal line to a piece of fabric, this is basically set at 180 degrees fold, so no fold, it's flat. But if you're gonna make a pleat and make adjustments to that fold, you can strengthen the fabric and it will very easily show you exactly what those folds are doing, versus if you're in like a mesh or certain specific fabrics, it can be very tricky to tell what's happening. So I toggle through strengthening pretty frequently as I'm working in a pattern, as I'm doing fit corrections or creating patterns. I toggle back and forth just to kind of like double check that what I'm doing to that pattern is actually happening. So it's just a good way to cross check. Another
one thing that drove me crazy when I first started learning is that there's strengthen and there's solidify. And so strengthen gives you this like plasticky smoothing effect. Solidify holds your wrinkle, like it holds the fabric the way it's positioned. So if there's like a wrinkle in your fabric and you go and hit solidify, it actually holds that wrinkle in place. And if you have strengthen and solidified together, it holds that wrinkle in place. So don't use solidify unless you're like intentionally using it that way. Stick with strengthen.
Does solidify have a color indicator at all? Is it just that strengthen is overriding it?
Yeah. It turns it gray like concrete.
Oh, okay. Thanks. That's helpful.
But yeah, if they're both selected, then they'll stay orange.
Okay.
Another tool that I use very frequently is the freeze tool. If we're working with some patterns we work with, we have 30 pieces to a complicated garment. And if you're freezing, for instance, freezing straps in place or freezing certain, strapping or any details, that allows you to keep the parts of the garment in place, and you can work through fit issues in another section or creating patterns in another section. And if you're working with a computer that's not quite as strong, this is also super helpful because you're not going to be overrunning your computer to try to play catch up with where you are. So, yeah.
Yeah, like if you wanted to like just work on this cup, you could kind of freeze everything else.
Mm-hmm.
And then like you don't have to worry about like all these seam lines getting in the way. You can just work on this, make your changes, and then unfreeze it when you're ready.
Yeah, especially when you're simulating with a high polygon count. It's super helpful.
Another thing you use freezing for, Monika, isn't it? When we use like hardware, because it doesn't like to stay in place.
Yeah, so I mean, when you work with hardware, there's a few different ways you can attack that. You can pull in trims and use like OBJs basically floating in space. Or if you're creating your own trim, or if you want to have the flexibility to simulate that trim, you can bring them in a bit differently as actual like pieces. And sometimes I will bring those in as pattern pieces and then freeze that in space. So that's also an option.
Something that I was thinking with the freezing, just for people who are beginners like me, if we want to show them just the fact that you can tug and pull a garment in Clo, that is, a feature that's interesting, and your garment can get off kilter if you tug and pull it the wrong way. You can also smooth it out. So if we just want to like pull it a little bit for everybody to kind of see, because I was just thinking, oh, if we could freeze it, then you're not yanking it out of the way.
Yeah, that's a good point. She's a little off kilter, so you pull her front right leg down a little, because now you got it. You fixed it.
I cannot figure out how to get rid of this red line, so we're just gonna have to accept it.
I've accepted it a long time ago. So.
Okay.
One of the things though that is another good call out that Colleen started, and Monika, I think you addressed it a little bit, is the polygon count, and the particle distance is kind of what is tied to that. So when you have a really small particle distance, your pattern pieces are going to move really slowly, especially if they're a big pattern piece, because it's making tiny polygons throughout the entire pattern piece. This has a particle distance of 8, for example. It's kind of slow to pull. If you made it into a particle distance of 20, it's going to look like garbage, but it's going to move a lot faster. So like it might even like sink into her skin. So in some places you might not even see it all the way because of the way the particle distance works. But every time you change the particle distance, it creates these new polygons, and it makes the render different and slower to have tiny polygons on a big piece. And it's better to use like an average in an ideal world. Like you don't want to have 5 as every piece, but like if you're working on relatively small pieces, between 8 and 10 is probably going to be okay for you. But that's another important feature that we didn't address yet.
I'll actually add a couple things to that, Kristen. So we're lucky in intimate apparel that our pattern pieces are small. So if, for example, you had like a gigantic skirt over here, you can see how many more polygons are necessary to create that gigantic pattern piece. So for small pattern pieces, not a big deal because there's not as many polygons. For bigger pattern pieces, you want to stick with larger polygon counts so that you're not making your computer work as hard. A few other things that affect these polygons are internal lines. So if I add an internal line to this, I don't know if you saw that, but you can see the polygons remesh themselves to make it work along that internal line. So more internal lines make your pattern work. Probably a straight line might work better. You can see the polygons remeshed to make themselves work along that line. So if you need a reference line, but you don't necessarily need an internal line because you're not sewing to it, for example, then you can use a baseline instead of an internal line. And to convert to a baseline, you just right click on your internal line and you convert to baseline somewhere.
I don't see it actually.
Yeah. Convert to baseline, yeah. And then that one line that I selected here, let me turn it back to this one. Kind of hard to see, but this line, the baseline is now like the purpley color and the internal line is the red color. Same with segment points. Every time you add a segment point, it's going to make your pattern remesh to where those segment points are. So best practice is to use less segment points when possible. If it's a curved line, you can convert them to curve points. And that's really important to know because it's nice to work with small particle distance, but you got to know what's happening behind the scenes as well. All right, I derailed us. What was where were we?
I think you're actually the next one to go. We're talking your favorite tools.
Okay, I really like the layering tool, and there's two ways to do layering. So I'm just going to show you with an example gusset here. So if I select this pattern piece, right click, and then I select layer clone under because we want a line gusset, you can do that. And now you can see in my 3D window, I have two gusset pieces. So it's a super easy way to create a lining, but sometimes these guys will collide with each other. They're not doing too bad right now, but let's do something like, let's see if I can get them to collide. I hope nobody's squirmish. We're all intimates people here, right? So we zoom in on crotches and bust points, et cetera, all the time. Okay, let me see. Okay, see how it's colliding? One's a little bit in and one's a little bit out. So my favorite way of fixing this really quickly is to use the layering tool right here. It's this one right here. So you're just going to tell Clo, I want this one on top of this one, or vice versa, I want this one underneath this one, and it should fix itself. It looks like it did a pretty good job. And the other way to apply layering is to select the pattern piece that you want. And then over here in your property editor you'll find layering somewhere right here. You can set that to layer 1. And your pattern piece should turn green. And then now Clo knows, okay, that needs to be the next layer on top of that layer. I like using that method, particularly for if I have like several garments on, like let's say we have like a t-shirt and then a jacket over top of that. You can select the whole jacket, like the whole garment, and then apply layer 1 to your whole garment, and it will all turn green. And then Clo will know if this is just telling you it's going to turn green. And then Clo will know this is going to be the outer layer. Doesn't make sense when I'm applying it to a bra, but I think the point is made.
Yeah, it's nice if you have a few things you're putting on top of each other, because they don't like each other if you don't create separate layers for each piece. If you layer anything on top of it, it just starts to fight each other.
Yeah, particularly in the same garment, like a pocket, you can just tell that, say the pocket is going to be, this piece is over top of this piece with this little tool right here. Yeah, that's all I had was layering. And I was going to talk about symmetry. Okay, so this pattern is symmetrized right now, and I can tell because of this dashed blue line down the middle. So if I make a change to this piece here, it's making a change to the other side symmetrically. Same thing here and same thing on the gusset. The bra pattern pieces, I can tell they're symmetrized because of this blue line connecting them. This is a feature that you can turn on and off up here. So I often turn it off to keep my screen cleaner, but if it's on, you can see quickly that they're symmetrized. You can, if you want to make something that's asymmetric, you can remove linked editing. And now I can modify this piece independently of the other piece. If I can grab the 1 point. So it's applied to this one and not applied to this one over here. And let's say you got a pattern that didn't have linked editing already applied. The easiest way to apply it, what I would do is just delete the other side of the pattern and then apply symmetric pattern with sewing to the other side. And as long as all of your other pieces have symmetry applied already, then the sewing from your original pattern piece will be applied to the new pattern piece.
I love this feature. It's so helpful.
And that goes the same thing if you have a piece like this and you want to remove linked editing, remove linked editing. So now this is not symmetrized anymore, but I want to reapply it. I have to cut this guy in half using my internal line tool. I'm going to cut. I'm going to delete the other side. And then I'm going to select this line, right click and offset, unfold symmetric editing with sewing. And so now when I simulate, all the sewing will already be applied.
One thing to note about this that I figured out the hard way is that you can't change the middle point into a curve point. It will not let you do that. It will unsymmetricize, make it not symmetrical anymore when you do that. It made me sad. So awesome. Awesome. Okay, that is all for our top 10 tools at the moment, but we did also want to run through the hotkeys really quickly. For us, I'm gonna share a keyboard link in the chat. So the top one is a link to sign up and get a free keyboard shortcut. I'm gonna hold up my screen. This is what it looks like. It's not ours, so we want to give that person credit. So please go sign up for it if you are interested. But this has been really helpful for me. I was looking for one for a long time, and Clo3d's version of it is really not good. It is very small and very pixelated, and you cannot tell what any of the keys are. So that's a great resource to learn the hotkeys. Also, there's 2 other videos in there that walk through all of the different tools and some of the hotkeys. So that's a great way to learn that. And then the big ones that we all use are which is transform pattern. That lets you grab the pattern and move it around, which is pretty easy. It's the triangle on the top most left hand or right hand side. And then the Z pattern, edit pattern, is the shortcut for edit. That one is always what we're using. I think that's probably the one I use the most. And then B, which is edit curve point. We use a lot of curves in lingerie and intimates, so editing the curve point is great. And then rotating the avatar, which is you have different keyboard commands based on whether you're on a Mac or a PC. But for me, it's, I think, Option. I had to set it up differently because of my pen. Option and then click, and then Command and then click, which is also really helpful. So you can spin her around or move her on the horizon. And then you
gotta learn that one. I just want to stress that to everyone. That is an important one to learn.
Super important. Super important. I also really love the 2 button because 2 resets her so that she's centered right in your window and you can just get it full on. If you actually run through the top row of numbers, it changes from like angle to angle, which is also really helpful. And then reset pattern, which is like it's shift in the parentheses. So the right hand parentheses. I know we also had a couple of other things to talk about, but we have 1 minute left, and I wanted to answer
that did go by fast.
I knew it would. I'm gonna share my screen. I'm gonna pull up our Q&A section. I'm curious if we have questions that we can answer really quickly. We can also stay on a little bit longer for people who don't have to jump off. Riley, do you have the questions sort of organized maybe?
Somewhat. I've been putting them into our document.
Okay.
There were a lot of questions about fabrics when we first started. A lot of people asking about like browseware and how you can kind of bring fabrics from there into it. And I know someone mentioned that they now have like a substance library that you can pull from. a lot of questions around creating custom poses for intimates. So I don't know if anyone has like fabric. I know you guys have mentioned like Clo3d in a couple different places where you get fabrics, but even how to like where you guys are getting your custom fabrics from.
I use VMod a lot. They actually are part of Swatch-On, I think. Swatch-On is a fabric manufacturer that has turned into like a fabric digitizer. And so their platform is really awesome because all of their swatches, they come with like a video showing like how the fabric actually works. But they took what they already knew, which is a lot about fabrics, and they created VMod, which is a digital library of a lot of their fabrics and other fabrics. You can also pay to have them digitize things. I've never done that, but I've gotten a lot of things there personally. Anybody else? Trudy?
Yeah, I same VMod, and then I modify. I just get as close as I can to what I think the properties are, and then I just modify the visual properties to match what I want.
Riley, I'm not sure where the questions are in our doc. Could you help?
They're in the chat. So the next question that I had, is there anywhere to have front and back pattern pieces constrained to one another, similar to Lectra?
I don't think so. Like if you modify the front pattern piece, I don't think there's a way to like make the changes. Like let's say we want to make the waist smaller all around. Is it something like that? You have to do it independently.
There are definitely some limitations in that.
Another question we had was, is there a way to confirm the fit is symmetrical after like a tug or a pull?
I don't think there is. I think you kind of have visual cues is all you've got. Strengthening it though can help actually.
Yeah,
True. That's true.
Or reset 3D pattern. We never really looked at that, but if things are like looking a bit off, you can just reset the 3D pattern and then things tend to go back in the right place.
Yeah, or use the arrangement points to replace them if they're not already used. You're not already using the arrangement points, because that will center it on the body for sure if you put it centered anyways.
This is also sometimes why it's nice to freeze items too. For instance, if you freeze the straps and you freeze them in a symmetrical placement, if you're making adjustments to the cup or to the back, then you know that once you simulate, it can go right back to being symmetrized.
Also, a lot of questions about creating like custom body avatars or like importing body avatars. And I know Steph was a great one in the chat that was referencing a lot of things in here, but I don't know if any of you guys have had experience with creating or like importing scans of bodies too.
So I was seeing that there's a lot of questions about that. And if you are importing a body scan, it's not attached to the Clo3d skeleton, so you can't make any adjustments to the poses. For instance, we have used DAS as well as Clo3d to create our own avatars, custom avatars for fit models or for certain cups that we need to follow. So
Yeah, there is.
I have, so you can bring in the DAS avatars with rigging points. I think it might just be like a matter of how you translate them from Clo3d to from DAS to Clo3d. And also I've had a body scan done and I converted that into an OBJ in Blender, which I was then able to export and bring into Clo3d. There's problems with the mesh on the body scan that I have, so I'm not able to rig it, but I am able to use it to put to put a garment onto it, but it's not a very smooth avatar. So I've never like solved the problem of like making that avatar more like a form rather than like my body with the lumps and bumps on it.
Yeah, there's definitely ways to make manipulations so that they are more like you. I would say DAS is definitely one of the best tools we've found for that so far. And I was also fiddling with it last week, and there's like a DAS to Blender bridge that also, if you export through that mechanism, it becomes easier to add rigging to the avatars. Haven't been successful with it yet, but I'm still learning DAS quite a bit, so we'll see what happens. But we have done a lot with DAS and making custom avatars there.
Also, some people might have played around with the auto convert to avatar feature in Clo. So you can take a DAS avatar or any avatar that has some at least like reasonable points, like body points onto it, and then use this feature in Clo called auto convert to avatar. The only problem with that is, like, let's say we took our DAS avatar and we like the bust shape and we like the bum shape. Well, when you convert it to a rigged avatar in Clo, it changes the shape that you made as your original avatar to make it work as a Clo avatar. So definitely some limitations.
Any other questions in there, Riley? I like don't know where I'm looking.
Yeah, we had
There's
another
so many
question.
people.
We had another question that said might be for a later session, but how do you guys deal with loops, knots, and hardware for swimwear and bras?
Monica's gonna answer that better.
It's a loaded question.
We try not to. We ignore it.
I think that's something we can talk about in a later session for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah, we'll
Yeah.
put that in there.
Hardware is its own beast. Hardware and then loops and knots are almost like 2 full sessions on their own.
Knots, bows, straps. Yeah.
Short answer though for knots and bows is try to find something that's already available in Clo and then just resize that and just kind of stick it on where you need it.
We had one earlier, and I'm not sure if the person's still on the call, but they were asking about elastics. And I know this was like a big topic that you guys were talking about the other day with getting excited about elastics.
Yeah,
Always
that
excited about elastics.
the original elastics feature in Clo is not as good as what's new about it. Before the new edition, you could only elasticize like the top edge of something, or like the bottom edge, one edge of something could be elastic. I mean, you could do both separately, but it's actually not like a row of elastic, like 10 millimeter elastic. It acts like one side of it is elasticized. There is a new update. I haven't gotten too much into it. I think Trudy's played around with it more than I have, but maybe she could speak to that, the new update.
Yeah, so this is what Kristen was talking about. Where the green line is, we have elastic applied over here, and you can see that in the property editor if you select your edit line tool. Whoops, that's the wrong tool. Want this one. Over here, you can see that we have elastic applied. 3 and 97 are the numbers that we typically use, but it only applies to this line on the garment. So that's not really how elastic works. It's usually like half a centimeter wide or something. So this a half a centimeter along this line is normally what would be elasticized. Clo has a new fabric in the library called, it's right here under elastic, and I like to use the knitted elastic. It's kind of a pain in the ass to use still because you have to apply a piece to sew onto that, which is again a little bit complicated and probably too much to get into right now.
We can definitely save some more of that for a future call though. Other questions, Riley?
We had one more. Someone was trying to download the free Clo trims, and they're not able to download it. Do you guys have any tips for that, or has anyone else struggled with that?
I don't know which ones they're talking about exactly.
The trims.
There's some that are preloaded, the preloaded ones. I don't have an answer for that right now. Trudy, Monika, Jasmine.
When there's new trims in here, there'll be a little blue arrow that pops up right here. I have everything up to date right now, so it's not here. But if there is, you just hit the little blue arrow, and it should be in your library. Like under your trims, you should have all of these already available. All of these, and then this little icon here connects you to the Clo3d library. So if you click on that, it'll open up a new window for you, and you have to sign into Clo3d, and then you'll have assets down here that you can download. And then once you download them, they'll be under My Items.
All right. I think I saw a couple of other questions about an M1 chip. It's just something that makes your computer go real fast and run effectively so that you can run graphics that are really complicated, which is like 3D graphics. That's all I can give you as far as the description of what that is. I don't know if anybody else knows better, but it's very helpful. Most Macs now, and all Macs now are coming with it, or like a better chip, but older Macs did not have it. So you might not have the M1 chip if you have a laptop pre 2018 or so.
It also, there's no fan in new Macs because of the processing, because of how a Mac processes. So it's just it's a completely different processing science.
Yeah, fun fact actually that I learned the other day, when you're rendering with a GPU versus a CPU, there's a different algorithm that's happening. So like when Monika and I share files, for example, we could get slightly different simulations because our computers are running off of different algorithms.
Yeah. There's also a question about some of the mistakes and patterns. I saw that. That's something we're going to address on a future call, so we don't have to address that right now, but stay tuned. I think next week and the week after we'll be more addressing that area. And we can address also like compatibility with patterns and sending them back and forth to factories, because that's going to be more included in next week's call, because we're going to talk a little bit about our workflow. And we definitely share patterns with our factories because we like to own and keep the changes close to our chests. So I don't know if I missed any more, Riley. I'm happy to stick around, but I'm sure a lot of these people probably have a weekend to get on with.
Canadian Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving, Canadians.
Aw, yay.
And happy Indigenous Peoples Day if you're in the US.
Yes.
Now a federal holiday. So anyway. All right. This was awesome. I am so appreciative of everybody who stuck around. Thank you so much for coming. We will see you next week. Toodaloo.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.